Hi friends, welcome to episode 79. Working on the frame this weekend. This is probably the, I don't know what to say it really, the least interesting because the frame is fairly repetitive. A lot of the bits of wood that I'm having to put in are all the same. And that's really good because I can have a little production line up here where I make all the little bits and then stick them back onto the bus. It's certainly not like the cab or around the engine compartment where every component was in itself different. So the frame is a lot easier. So I'm making some quite good progress on this, hoping to put some of the wood back in it this week. As you may remember from last week, if you watched last week's episode, you'll notice that I'd made up some of the bits of wood for it. So this weekend, I'm going to start refabricating or putting that back onto the vehicle. So, yeah, that'll keep me occupied for the rest of the weekend, won't it? The other thing is, episode 80, I want to make that as a special episode because I've had this bus now for 40 odd years and I thought it'd be a nice idea to do a special episode. So I'm working on that at the moment. If I don't get it done in time and you end up with episode 81 as the very next one, you know I'm still working on it. So, right, first thing I do, put the kettle on. See you later. Right, despite it being June, it was tipping down with rain, unfortunately, on Saturday. Although it did brighten up, it was really nice. It brightened up in the afternoon, sufficient for me to put some panels outside, and hopefully they dried. No, one of them didn't dry as well as I hoped. But anyway, it's always the way it goes. So, anyway, this edition, ignoring the pouring down rain outside, I'm getting on with the frame. So some more bits go back in. The good thing about it is it does look like progress, although it does feel painfully slow. Okay, let's kick off this weekend's edition with the work I needed to do on these panels. These are the waste rail panels that sit just below the window on the lower deck. You might notice the one at the bottom is pretty rotted out. The one at the top is a nice new one. I managed to acquire two of those from a preservationist, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I've got to make these two, or at least the one at the top, exactly like the one below. So let's kick off then, shall we? Right, this is the waste rail panels. I have to be a bit careful because I was calling them stress panels because I think they're stress panels. On a Routemaster they have stress panels. On an RT they have stress panels, but in a completely different place. But I call these the stress panels. And Brian Watkinson points out, no, they're not. But they just look a bit like a stress panel, don't they? All right, anyway, each one of these waste rail panels are different. And this one is from the second bay, or bay B, as I've lettered it. This is a replacement, but what you've got on here, this is the seat mounting bracket. And obviously that's the reason why each one's different, is they vary depending upon where they are inside the bus. And they are sort of a semi-permanent fixture. There you go, look. So I need to take that off later on, and I need to get this thing out. I'll do that later on. Right, so the problem is this one is for bay A. So I'm going to have to convert it into bay B. What I plan to do is to cut out along here and then turn this entire thing round so that it now meets the same as bay B. Yeah, that should be a bit of fun, and then we need to just weld it all back in place again. So that's the plan of action on here. If it all goes completely wrong, I've still got this bit of metal here, which isn't too bad. We can clean it up and reuse it. But if I can, it's going to be turning this round, welding it in, and popping it back. But you can see here, this section here, I mean, the rot starts up there and then runs right the way off the end. There's also some rot down the far end there as well, and then runs right the way off. And that bit there had almost completely gone. It just came out in flakes, basically. But luckily, an enthusiast thought ahead some years back who's restoring his own RTs, and he's done quite a lot of credit to the guy. Had the foresight of getting these made, but he only had one bay made, and he had several of these bay A. But you know, it's better than nothing, isn't it? So that gave me a little job for today. Right, as I said before, me and a pot of paint, I'm never very far away. Right, although this is not a pot of paint, it's a spray can, as you can see. Right, these are the two of those waste rail panels that I bought. And to me, I like to put a coat of paint on everything before I put it back on the bus. It's one of those strange little things I do. This is Hammerite, it's spray Hammerite paint. I have got brush paint as well, but I thought it was far too much of a faff to get the spray gun out and just to spray this little bit. So these little cans are actually really quite useful. Right, the one at the top that I'm now spraying over, that one has already been made up, and if you look at the far ends here, you can actually see the holes that I've drilled so it fits onto the frame. That was going to turn out to be a little bit of a faff later on, but nonetheless. The one at the bottom is the one that's got to be amended. It's exactly the same at the moment as the one at the top, but I'm going to make that to fit bay 2. So there we are. So that's a quick blow over of the paint. I've done the other side on that top one already with silver paint, but I'm not going to spray the other side of that second one until we've finally welded it up. There you go. All right, so let's move on. Right, so here is panel A, sprayed as you saw me doing before. This is the other side, this is the silver Hammerite as well. And that's the old original panel at the top with a little bit of the metal moth, I like to call it metal moth. The rust has started to get into it. So yeah, that one's been changed. The next panel along, which is panel B, as you saw earlier on, is a far worse situation than this one. So this was actually relatively easy. So all I've got to do now is to fit this to the bus. Right, so having sprayed this waste rail panel and left it sit outside in the sun, it actually got quite warm. After it pizzaed down with rain first thing in the morning, the sun came out, it wasn't too bad. So what I've got to do is there's two bolts or two nuts, or two bolts actually, that are just inside there. You can't see them, and they run through the bulkhead, and without taking that bulkhead front off that I've done, I'm not going to be able to access them, so I need to be very, very careful with them. And this is really tight getting this in there, so the old hammer comes out and I've got to lightly tap it back into place. There you go. So this is quite a simple little job. There's 6 bolts there, 3 on that bracket, and there's 3 at the bracket where my hand is at the moment. The profile is slightly different on that because I'm looking at it now and thinking, why is that sticking out? So I'm hoping that when I've got all 6 bolts in it, it'll pull it a bit tighter. So right, well that's waste rail panel number 1, or A, in. Right, those 2 brackets that you saw earlier on for the seats, they need to come off, both of these, both this rotted one and also panel A. So I had to get the angle grinder out because they've got some small semi-raised cold rivets. I'm not using cold rivets to put them back. I'm actually going to use tiny nuts and bolts. That's the plan of action. So here I am with the angle grinder creating a lot of sparks, almost a bit like a Guy Fawkes night party, isn't it? So there we are. Yep, thanks very much my brother for giving me that. It was a little present from Daryl. So thanks Daryl for that. Right, so once I've tried to set the workshop on fire with the grinder, here I am removing this little bracket. This is going to be reused. The rest of it isn't. The vast majority you see in the picture is going to go in the bin. But this bit needs to be reused because it has to be fitted into those new ones that we've got. Right, having fitted panel A, now it's the time to get on with panel B. What we've got to do is we've got to make one of these waste rail panels for the first bay fit the second bay. So what I've got to do is I've got to move the seat fixing bracket, which is on the back here, plus I've got to sort of move all this down a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to angle grind out the top sort of 4 bits that you see there, and then swap the whole thing around so it matches the old one which sits just above it. Right, okay, let's get out the fire starter. Sorry, I mean the angle grinder, and get this hole cut. It needs to be as straight as possible. I've marked out, as you can see already, some lines on there, and they're marked 15 millimeters. I'm using millimeters. I don't know. I'm catching on from my brother because normally I go half an inch or something, but for some reason it's 15 millimeters. My brother's into metric and I'm into imperial because I'm a little bit older than him. So anyway, this needs to be cut as straight as possible. Good thing about the angle grinder is the angle grinder actually has got it's a circular blade, so it doesn't wander off if I was using one of my metal cutters. So what I need to do is to cut this out, and then we need to spin the whole thing around before we weld it together, which I'm going to do at work. It's not going to be done in here. But yeah, I think, having worked that out about, I don't know, spent about half an hour trying to make sure it was actually perfect, that I've got it right. Right, and abracadabra, here we are. This is it turned round now. So yeah, it's not bad. Obviously, we need to do a little bit more sort of infilling with the when we do the welding, but it's pretty much in the right place. And the seat bracket, which I'll put in later on, that also helps line everything up as well. So yeah, a pretty good attempt, I think. I'm quite happy with that. Right, so having got the waist rail panel in, and the other one, as you know, is work in progress, it's now time to turn to the woodwork. These little wooden blocks are ones I salvaged off the original woodwork. I had more success getting them off the bus. There's 12 in total, plus there's a couple of extras at the far end, slightly different design to these. And they came out okay. But there's a couple, you can see that one in the middle there, it's got a little bit of wood glue on it. There's a few of them actually split. 4 out of the 12 split, but we're able to take a bit of wood glue and stick them back together again. One of the advantages of doing this woodwork is, unlike in the cab, where you're really tight on space, you've got lots of space on this to sort of swing things around. What I'm doing here is I've got an original piece of wood that I've taken out, and you can just see that discoloration just in front of the set square there. And that's where the original little bits of wood that we just saw just now fitted. So that's how I did this. So what I did was I marked up both sides. So that's how I knew where to refix those recycled pieces of wood. Right, so now having reaffixed those little pieces of wood to our little sort of length of wood that sits over the top of that waist rail panel, now it comes time to put it back in the bus. What I've got to do is I've got to make sure that the main piece of that wood protrudes very slightly over the top of that that waist rail panel. You can just about see, if you look very carefully at the back of shot, I've already done those two, and those two were on the original waist rail panels, but for some reason this one just wouldn't go straight, and I spent ages trying to get it right. Now those little sort of screws that hold it down, the little bolts, that each one of those 4 panels has different mounting points. It's really weird. So anyway, it was a little bit of work to try and get it right, and at this point I'm not entirely convinced I've got it right, to be honest with you. So lots of faffing around, and I went home on Saturday and I just wasn't happy with this. Right, while we're working in this area, I'll point out that where I'm about to put that clamp, there's another little piece of wood that sits behind it. And you may recall from before I stripped this down that this is where the garage stencil plate goes. So there's a little bit of wood that goes at the back of that waist rail panel, is what the screws for the garage plate go into. Right, before we leave this shot, here is a picture of what it looked like before with the old rusted panel in there. There's that little bit of fibre material just up the top on the right hand side of shot that I saved, so that'll be glued and being put back in again. Just a little thing on these, this alternative panel that I've got here. I spent quite a lot of time last night before I went home. I really wanted to get Bay A finished because I got the panel, got the wood done. I really was keen to get that done, and I spent ages trying to get it lined up. The wood just didn't sit right. It curves back round. And I had a look at these this morning. This one's got a very angular sort of bend on it, but this one has got a much softer bend, like that. If you have a look at that, that's quite nice and soft. All very good, except when you put the wood on it, it pulls the wood in an odd shape. So I had to spend, I don't know, an hour or so this morning repositioning the wood on bay A, which is time wasted. But it's better to get it done now. I know I said this before with a wing. Better get it done now than put all the panels back on the bus and the thing's just not right. I mean, I could do some adjustment of the wood, but like with a planer and stuff like that, plane it back down and get it straight. But the wood definitely on bay A is pulling down slightly incorrectly, and I couldn't work out why I was having so much trouble with it. It was only when I came in this morning and looked at this one, and I thought that's my problem. Oh, the other thing is I sprayed this black at the back. A good little thing yesterday, so I put it outside in the sun because it's nice and sunny. Today is Sunday, by the way, and this hadn't dried, and I put my fingers in it, so I got fingerprints in there, so I have to do that later on. Right, so there we are. Let's push on, shall we? Right, you'll recall this, I think, from last week when I took all the wood out. That's what it looks like without the wood in place. This bracket over in the far side here, that's pretty rotted, to be honest with you. I'm probably going to have to replace that. That one's not too bad, actually, but they are quite fragile. They've had better days. Right, now the other issue is this bay here. Now, you look at that and you think there's something wrong with it, do you? But when you actually go down here, there we go. Look at that. That's wood. Now, that wood that's there is supposed to be covered with metal, which is there. So if you see that metal has rusted out all the way down there, look. So that's going to have to come out. Unfortunately, that also means I've got to take the floor out. So that bit of the floor is going to have to come out in order that I can access that that rotten piece of wood. It's lucky, really, that I haven't put the floor back in, isn't it? But there we are. And probably have to take a little bit of that wheelarch out as well, maybe. I shall see. And the other one is this bit here. Now, when the camera moves about a bit, sorry about it flicking around. That is completely live. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just push the, there you go, pushing the dog rails. You can see it's off the bus. So that needs to be dealt with as well. So there'll be a job here, probably for a few weekends, I think, trying to get that floor out, get that panel out. I may actually, if I get some time, I might actually start on that this weekend. And also the final thing I need to do is to give this a last clean off underneath and then chassis silver her from this side. Right, well, despite my best intentions, I didn't get round to starting on that final bay, but never mind. I've got this bit to do. This is the bit around the fuel tank. You might recall it had some really badly rotted wood either side. So I removed the bits of rotted wood, copied them, and making up some new bits of wood to go back in. The only bit that I've retained is that rather healthy looking sort of, I don't say triangular, but that little piece of wood that bridges across the top. So I retained that. And I've retained those ones that go downwards. I had to use a little bit of filler in them because they're a little bit rotted towards the top, but nonetheless are usable. In the future, at some point, I'm also going to replace those little bits of wood that are right down the bottom, just slightly below the fuel tank there. Right, so this is me just doing a little initial test fit to make sure the bits of wood that I made have actually fitted, and then what I've got to do is just attach that little piece of wood that bridged across the top later on. That in itself, relatively little simple job. I'm going to have to do that bracket at the far end. The one that's nearest camera is reusable, but I'm going to have to buy some commercial bracket, I think, because I've run out of those brackets now. They do have a habit of rotting away, and unfortunately they are actually welded on to the frame, which means you can't just simply remove them. When you look at them, you think, oh, there's just two bolts in there, but you have to end up getting the angle grinder out and just grinding them back off again to make a sort of a flat, clean surface, which is exactly what I've had to do. Right, now it's the turn of this wood around the platform. This picture is just before I cleaned it up and put the hammerite on it. You can see the state of that wood down there is really terrible. Yeah, that was common on the other side of the bus. I found an awful lot of wood like that. But this is a simple bit to replace, so there's no great shakes with this one. Right, so just a few bolts really, 3 bolts, and that's that done. I've got a little bit more to do, as you can see on that black there, just where my hands are. There was a little hole there, and I filled it with stuff called chemical metal, because it clearly, at some point, the water had sat on that bit of metal there, and then it made its way through that stress panel. I'm sure that's a stress panel. I'm sure Brian will pick me up and say, no, it's not, Dean, it's just a panel. Anyway, well, whatever it is anyway. So it made its way through there, made a little hole. So it was time to fix that as well. I shall paint that black the next time I get the black can of paint out. Right, I thought it'd be worthwhile putting these two side by side so you can just see the improvement. The hammerite makes it look an awful lot better as well. The hammerite, if you've not come across it, it goes direct onto rust and it stops it rusting. And I did the other side with hammerite a long while ago, I mean like 30 odd years ago, and I haven't seen any rust. Well, the bus has not been out anyway, has it? But nonetheless, it's quite a good paint. It's pretty good. But I did clean off all the rusty bits that were up the top there. You see all that rust there. I cleaned that off with a wire brush before painting it to get rid of as much of the loose stuff as I possibly can. Yep, so we're progressing this weekend. It's not bad. I'm really pleased with where we're going with this. So, right, let's finish with a couple of pictures of the bus over the last couple of years. So, right, the one at the top is 2023, as the text says. And that was as I found the bus after I cleared all the muck up in the shed. Yeah, and you might notice if you look very carefully that the shelves that are on the right hand side haven't got a lot on them. They're actually packed solid now with pots of paint and stuff. So yeah, there we are, and the tyres obviously been pumped up as well, poor thing. So yeah, that was once I cleared all that muck out the way. And the bottom shot is how she looks when I left on Sunday. Yeah, a bit of progress. Right, now, I'm very grateful to John Parkin for supplying me this picture of RT3461 at Croydon departing away from us. So yeah, nice to see a rear end shot and see what adverts are on the back as well. So thanks very much to John. John's given me a complete potpourri of pictures of 3461 over the years, and I'm hoping I'll get to include those in episode 80. So thanks very much to John for that. And if you haven't already seen John's YouTube videos, he's just launched another one on London Country Bus Services, so I'll put the link below for you if you're interested. So well, thanks very much. I've enjoyed this weekend. It's been a nice weekend up the barn, and I enjoyed putting this together as well. And I'm looking forward to this coming weekend when I've managed to purchase some window pans. Right, see you next time.